Hello and welcome to this tutorial where we'll show you how you're getting started with ASP.NET Core Web App. So before you can follow along in this video, you need to download Visual Studio 2022, the Community Edition, and that's just a normal installation. I will link it in the description where to download. And when you install, it is important that you choose this workload, ASP.NET and Web Development, because this will include the ASP.NET Core. But if you already have installed Visual Studio 2022 and you just want to go in and download this workload and install it, then I will just show you the path. You can go to Tools and click Get Tools and Features. And then you get to this window where, as you can see, if I click this one, you can see I can modify it and then it will install. But for now, let's close all this and let's create a new project. So I will just open up the front page of Visual Studio 2022 and then let's hit create a new project. So this project will be an ASP.NET Core Web App. And when we choose this, you can see that it already have some examples of Razor pages that is already set up. And that's pretty nice because then we have a template that we can work on. So let's click on this one and hit next. So now we can give the project a name. Let's call this first project. And remember to make it just one word, no spaces, because we need to use this as a namespace in the project. And to making it without spaces, that's just how you do it in ASP.NET when you create a project name. But the location is good and the solution name is also fine. And in our cases, we don't need to place the solution in and project in the same folder or directory. So let's just hit next. So the next thing is that we want to choose what framework we want to use. And in our case, we just want to use .NET 6. That's the long-term supported version. And as you can see, I don't really have any other choices because I have nothing installed else. Because when you download Visual Studio 2022, it's just .NET 6 that would be the standard for Visual Studio. And we don't want to use the authentication type, so we will just say none. And configure for HTTPS, that's okay. And enabling Docker, we don't want to do that. But it is a very nice feature. But if you want to learn Docker, then please go to YouTube and check some videos because there's tons of videos on how Docker works and what it is. And also videos how it works in ASP.NET and Visual Studio in general. So for now, let's hit create. The project can take a while to create, but it all depends on how fast your computer is. And for this box, we will just hit don't show again. So as we can see, Microsoft, they really try to learn us about how ASP.NET Core is working. First, they give us some links to the documentation and how to structure your .NET application. So you can go read these if you want to learn more about that. And also how we connect to Azure, which is their cloud solution. So if you want to host your website in Azure, in Microsoft's cloud, then you might want to read some of these. And finally, they have some links to how you use Visual Studio and how to write faster code. But the first thing I will do is to show you that when you create a new project, you can just run it instantly. You don't really even have to know any code at the beginning to run it. You can just go and hit this first project, and that will just run the application. So as you can see, this is the default template of our project. We have a home page and we have a privacy page. And don't worry if you run the application and you get a box that says something about the certificate. You just have to say okay to it, because that is just a required thing you have to accept. And when you accept it the first time, you will not see it again. But for now, let's try to go to the Solution Explorer. And let's look at what is inside our first project folder. So first of all, we have this called Connected Services. And I don't think in the beginning you are going to use that. But what you want to use a lot is this dependencies. And as you can see, under the dependencies, we have analyzers and we have frameworks. And the frameworks is surely the most important place, because if we open this, Then you can see right now we have two dependencies in here. We have Microsoft ASP.NET Core App and Microsoft.NET Core .app. And these are the two core frameworks when working in ASP.NET Core. But you really don't want to go into these ones. The only thing that we are going to do is to install new dependencies. So if you, for example, would like to make a connection to a database, you need maybe a MySQL dependency, and then you will install it and it will be put inside here. So this is actually just to see what dependencies you have installed. So if we close this one again and let's go to properties, then we have this launch settings.json file. And in here, I think in the beginning, you also don't want to edit anything, but it will show you the URL and the port for when you open the project. And as you can see, we can also enable some Windows authentication. Right now it's false. We just have anonymous authentication right now. And you could also say that, do you want to launch the browser when you open the project? And in our case, it will be true because this is a website. But to begin with, all this should be okay. So let's go to the next folder, which is called www.root. And this will be the root of our website. And as you can see, we already have a CSS folder and a JavaScript folder and then a library folder. And if we open the CSS folder, you can see that we have this site.css, which is the default CSS file that we use in the project. As you can see, this is the default setup to begin with. You can of course also make your own CSS files, but then you will have to link it in the header. And the same goes for the JS folder. If we open this, we have a site.js where you can write your JavaScript. And the final folder is the libraries, where we have Bootstrap and jQuery, because when you create a ASP.NET Core web app, Bootstrap and jQuery will already be included in the project. And finally, we have the fav icon, which is the small icon you can see in the tab in the browser. But let's close this and let's look at this pages, because it's almost the most important folder that we have in our project. Because as you can see, we have all the HTML pages. But actually, when working with Razor pages, it's not just a .html page, it's called a .cshtml. And if we try to open this index.cshtml file, you can see that we have this piece of code that is telling us that this is a Razor page. So the only thing that this page is doing is that it tells that we are now going to start a new Razor page. And next up, we want to say what model do we want to use on this web page. And in our case, we say index model. And the way that this Razor page knows what index model is, then we have to go over to the Solution Explorer and look that there is this index file. And if we expand this, we have the index.cshtml.cs file. And when we open this file, we can see that this is a C# file. And as you can see, we have this index model class. So what the index.cshtml page is doing is that it says, okay, where is index model? And then it looks in the same folder. I know that this doesn't look like it's the same folder, but if we right click and we say open folder in File Explorer, we can see that all the files are just beside each other. So it's actually in the same folder, both the index files. But if you watch it in Solution Explorer, you can see that it doesn't look like they're in the same folder. But that is just Visual Studio trying to make it easier to get an overview of the files. So this HTML or CS.html file is looking for index model in a file called the same, but with a .cs extension on it. And then it will look inside the file and see that we have this index model class. So that's actually how we link to the code behind from the index.cs HTML file or the Razor page file. And the next thing in this Razor page file is the view data, where we are going to target the title, and this will be called home page. So this is just the title of the page. And I will show you in a moment where this comes from. But the last part of this index file is then our HTML. But if we want to try to find out where this view data is coming from, then let's go to the Solution Explorer again, and we will try to take a look at this shared folder. So let's expand this, and inside here we have this underscore layout file. And what the underscore means is that we have a partial view. So this is not a whole page like the index. This is just a part of a page. But let's try to open this. And as you can see in here, we have our head section, we have our body, and then we have the menu. And if we scroll a bit down, we have this called render body, which is actually the whole index.cs HTML file, or the error file, or the privacy file. It depends on what page you're on. But this is the place where it will render this HTML file. But if we scroll up again, you can see that in the title tag, we have this view data called title. And then we actually have a dash and our project name. So on the front page, our title will actually be home page, and then a space and a dash and a space and then the project name, because this is now the variable for whatever we set the title to on the individual pages. But now that we have a better understanding of the pages folder, and of course we will come back to this to try and play around with some things, then let's just close it and go to the app settings.json, and let's open the app settings.development.json file. And this is also a file where you can configure a lot of things. And right now, as default, we can see that this is the locking configuration. So this is actually where you want to tell how should the locking be configured. And the locking is when you open the project, you have this console window open where it will log a lot of things. And if we go to our CS file in the index, we can see that it also as default has set up a logger that we can use. But I will not go into details with it in this video. There's a lot of videos about logging and how you're going to do it, so I will recommend to watch one of these. But for now, let's try to go to the last folder in this project, and it's actually just a file called program.cs. And this is actually the file that is building the project and initializing everything that we need to use to make the project work. So it's also in here that you want to add services. Like here you have a builder that create a builder. And in here we say that in the builder, we want to use a service called add Razor pages. So this is just telling that in our project, we want to use Razor pages. And there's a lot of services that you can use. And when you move further into a project, you are surely going to use some services that you want to include in the project. And then you need to go to the program.cs file to set them up. But next we also have this variable called app, and that's just the builder that's going to be built. So you could say that the builder up here, this section, that would be the services that you will add to, as they call it, the container of the project. And beneath here, you are going to configure these services. So just like you add the Razor pages here, you can see that down here we're going to map Razor pages. So that's a configuration inside the service. But then when you see all the other configurations, then you may be wondering where the services is for these. But as you might figure out, this is just a already built-in service from ASP.NET Core, where this Razor pages is not really a standard thing in ASP.NET, but it is of course used a lot. But if you don't want it, you are able to remove the service here and just remove this also. But what we are doing else is that we have this is development. So this is only a thing that will happen if we are in Visual Studio and not if we upload it to a server. So in this case, it would, for example, use a exception handler page so that we get the error message. But if you're not in development, it will not show. So if you have this in a production environment where other peoples are seeing the app or the website, then they will not get a page where they say, oh, it's this line of code that's going wrong. They will just get a default 404 page if you set it up. And I actually have a video on how you set it up. I will put it in a card in this video. It is pretty simple to do, so I will recommend that you also watch that because it gives a better experience from the user. But if you want to, you can of course go and read about these configurations and what they're doing, and if you don't want them or if you want to add some new ones. But after all these configurations, it will then say run the app. So you could say that this program.cs file is our building block, and it is the foundation to make the application work at all. But for now, let's go back to the pages folder. And let's just close this one and open the pages folder. And then let's try to see how you display a variable from your CS file into your CS HTML file. So let's go to the index, or actually let's go to the CS file. And let's just remove this logger because we're not going to use it. And then inside our class, let's make a property. So just type prop and then hit tab 2 times. And let's say that this should be a string. And just let's call it a name. And let's actually get rid of this get and set because we don't need it. And let's go to the onGet method. And what this onGet method is that when the page is loading, so when the index page, the front page is loading, it will automatically execute the onGet method. So when the page is loading, we want to say that name should be equal to, and let's just say something, let's try to say bootstrap maybe. And let's go back to our CS HTML file where we then want to display the name. So instead of welcome, we want to use the @ sign and then type model because we want to use our model from our index model class. And then let's type a dot and then we want to say name. So if we try to run the project now, we can see that the title where it said welcome before is now set to bootstrap. And we're doing all that by using a variable in our .cs file. Or actually we are using a property to display it in our model. But to play around a little bit, we can also use a if statement here. So we say the @ sign again, and we say if, and we can just use the curly brackets as we normally do when we're using an if statement. And then we can say model, and now we don't have to use the @ sign again because we already use it over here. So we can say model.name equals to bootstrap. So let's try to make a h2 header where we say, yes, this is bootstrap. And again, let's try to run the project. And now, as you can see, it displays, yes, this is bootstrap. And that's because our model name is bootstrap. But if we say bootstrap 2 and we run this again, then the if statement will be false and we will not get the text displayed. And of course, in an if statement, we can also use else. So it will just be like this. And let's try to make a new h2 tag and say, no, this is not bootstrap. And let's run it again. And now you can see it will display, no, this is not bootstrap, because our if statement is false. You can also use the model variable up in this part of the code. So if we instead of homepage would say model.name, and let's run the project again, then as you can see, our title will now be bootstrap. But the next thing I will try to do is to make a for loop inside our CS.html file. So let's go back and let's make a new property where we want to say prop again and tab twice. And we will say this should be a list, and it should be a list of strings. And let's call this name list and just remove this. So now we can go to the code again, and let's say that first of all we want to initialize the name list, so it is actually a name list. So we say new list. It also recommended to do it, and then we can say name list dot add, and we will add a name in here. So let's say John, and let's copy and paste this a couple of times, and I will just write some names. So now I added the names, and of course in a real world situation you might want to connect to a database and get the names from the database. But right now I will just hard code it so you can see how you make a for each inside our CS HTML file. So beneath the paragraph I just want to make some breaks, so we get some space between the paragraph and the list I will make now. So let's start to make an unordered list, and inside here we want to use the add sign, and we want to say for each, and then we want to say var, and we want to say name in name in model dot name list, and use the curly brackets. So now we can make a list item in here, and we have to say the add sign again and then say name, because then we are using the name variable when it gets for each. So let's try to run this, and now you can see that we get all the names displayed. But now let's try to go and look how you link from one page to another. So let's go to the underscore layouts file, and then this is actually the menu on the page, and we have this anchor tag where it says that the home button or the home anchor tag will link to the /index file. And we're going to use this ASP-page attribute, because when we are using that we can just say / because this is the root of our pages folder, and then index because this is the name of the file. But now let's try to go and make our own page, and I will actually first make a folder inside the pages folder. So let's say add and say new folder, and let's call this test folder, and inside that folder we want to right click and say add a new razor page, and we just want to add a empty razor page. So let's hit add, and just let's call it index.cshtml, so that's fine. And then just let's add a h1 tag to this, and let's call it test folder index file. So the reason that we can also call this index is because it is not in the same folder level as our other index file, but you can only have one index file in every folder. But now if we test this and open the project, then we can actually go to the URL and type / and then type test folder. And now we're inside our test folder's index file. But if we want to make this a part of the menu, then let's close this and let's go to the menu again. It's inside our shared folder and inside our layouts file. And then just take this list element and copy and paste it and just align it. And then let's go and edit the path. So we say test folder, and again we say index, and let's change the name to new index folder. So if we run the application now, you can see that we got this new index folder in our menu. So if we click this, you will now get directed to our new file. But now that you have been introduced to ASP.NET Core Web App, You will now be able to play around with it and learn some new stuff. And if you're interested, I also have a lot of other tutorials where I'll show you how you do a lot of things. For example, how you set up a search bar, or how you make a cookie consent pop-up box, and how you send an email. And a very important thing also, how to set up your MySQL database to an ASP.NET Core web app. And as I mentioned earlier, how you set up a 404 default error page. But always thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video and learn you some more about ASP.NET Core. And remember to like and subscribe if you like the video, and then I'll see you next time. Bye.